You've all provoked a phone call. Let's take our first phone call so far. Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, it's Dan Elwood here.
Hi. What would you like to say to our guests?
I was just wondering whether your guests recognise the important role that financial institutions, including investment banks, have played in the overall economic growth over the last century, and what they think the impact of some of the proposed regulations we've been hearing over the last week might have on their ability to efficiently fulfil this role going forward.
So you think our banks have been a good thing in terms of the wealth they've generated?
I think overall, yeah. I mean, certainly they have their ups and downs, but I think overall they've played a very important role in distributing capital to where it's needed. And obviously they're susceptible to some of the problems we've seen over the last couple of years. But I don't think we should forget that they've been an engine for growth over the last century.
Well, you don't often get a call defending the bankers. Jan, what's your response to that?
I mean, I have a certain sympathy with this view. There has been growth generated by banking, but it's not necessarily the kind of growth that we want, and it's not necessarily the banking system that we want, because it's a banking system which doesn't support industry as well as it should. There've been reports and inquiries on the banking system. All of them have taken on the city's line that the bank deregulation is necessary because it supports, because it provides funds for industrial investment. It doesn't provide funds for industrial investment. We're still one of the lowest investing countries in the world. So the banks need to...
It's almost like if you have a successful banking system, you're going to shrivel your manufacturing. You just can't get the two there together.
That's right. Yeah. And I mean, I even remember the kind of headbanging that Margaret Thatcher had to do in the city to get them to finance the Channel Tunnel.
She was scary enough without having to bang heads. Anyhow, let's take another one of our questions we recorded earlier.
Which political party would take action on the banks? Au revoir.
Well, Dan, this is clearly for you. I mean, why are we seeming to be frightened of upsetting the bankers? Why don't we just say, well, we'll have a top rate of tax of 60% on earnings over 150,000? I mean, we were used to that for generations.
Yeah, I think that it's a very, very sensible thing. There is one of the unspoken problems of the British economy is the widening disparities of income, and it's one of the factors that, for example, is distorting the housing market in London. Yes, you could resolve that to some extent by taxation. On the point of actually challenging the way in which banks operate and the financial system works, the real difficulty has been the abject cravenness of politicians who believe that the only people who understand the city are the people who are working there, and so if you want to make changes in the city, you have to ask someone from Goldman Sachs or an investment bank to tell you what should be done, and inevitably they will
say they need more money.
Yeah, they will say they need more money. That's what they understand.
Carol, you became a political activist at a time when the top rate of tax was over 80%, and we seem to have more bankers than we needed then. Do you fear that bankers might go if we made them pay a bit more tax?
I think it would be excellent if a few bankers went, and I'm speaking as a sort of individual who lives on an earned income, and the lower the rate of interest drops, the higher I pay on my credit cards and overdrafts and all the rest of it. I think you obviously need a means of circulating money within the system, which is one of the things that banking helps to do. But the way in which they do it is not designed for the majority interests of society, in my opinion. We'd do very well if banks were greater.
Right, let's take our, thanks, Gav. Let's take our next question.
With all like the mainstream parties talking about cutting public spending, why don't we just get rid of you know, all the money that goes towards nuclear weapons, and it will just be free to help out the spending that we're cutting from.
Carol, how much are we spending on nuclear weapons, and how much would we save if we just gave them up?
If we upgrade Trident, then we're spending at least 76 billion, probably more, over a period of time. If we gave them up, there would be an initial cost of decommissioning, because we'd have to make things safe. But if we gave them up, we could divert resources into the manufacturing jobs that Jan was talking about earlier, and we'd save. The defence budget is the second biggest budget of the government.
That's 73 billion over what, 20 years? 76
billion over. By now it must be about 13 or 14 years.
Originally, just 13 or 14 years?
Well, originally when the figure was estimated, which was 2 or 3 years ago, it was over a period of 20 years.
So, I mean, we all talk in billions. What does that buy us, Jan, in terms of schools or teachers or hospitals?
I mean, it's very, it doesn't actually buy all that much over an extended period of time. I think that what the real issue is that it actually distracts resources from practical military capability, which quite possibly the country might need in its defence. But certainly would that kind of money would always be useful in terms of financing schools, health, and education. All of this kind of public financing has been messed up quite a lot by the very opaque practices that go into the private finance initiative. And I'm afraid that if one gave up Trident, probably a huge amount of the money would simply go into repaying for some of the state-of-the-art, possibly too state-of-the-art facilities that have been built in the health service and in education in recent years through the private finance initiative.
We've got another caller from London. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, hello.
Hi. What was the point you'd like to put?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question, sort of relating back to what you were saying about banking regulation, and the possibility of firms leaving the city, leaving New York, et cetera, which always comes up when regulatory issues are discussed. I was wondering if it maybe wouldn't be a better solution to attempt to sort of configure some sort of international framework, in which all developed economies would essentially agree to not to permit firms that engage in the trade of certain practices to function to trade within the financial jurisdiction of their regulators. I mean, essentially that would eliminate the market for the more esoteric sort of products. And while maybe it's true that some banks would go to places like the Marshall Islands or Nauru or something like that, where the products might be allowed, the sort of systemic threat that the previous the trading of these things in developed economies wouldn't exist in the same sort of situation. Do you think something like that would be feasible, or I mean?
Well, I can remember just about that at one point de Gaulle the president of France, was so angry that rich French people were putting all their money into Monaco. He sent tanks there and forced them to give the banking details out. If the Western nations stick together, you can screw down all these little tax havens. I mean, who are the people that are dragging their feet on this in terms of governments?
There are the governments that have dragged their feet in the past are, of course, the governments of, for example, Switzerland, very notably, but also a number of tax havens in the Caribbean, most of whom, incidentally, are British dependencies. So we can deal with it. So we could deal.
We got another caller coming in. Yeah. Hello, I think it's Alex. Is it? Hi. We've lost the caller. I mean, basically, is Britain one of the people that's been talking about this but not doing anything about it? Have we changed our mind? Do we realise we've suffered from this?
No, the problem is that the British government is rather too craven to city interests and buys this line that